I love it.
Hello, Julie.
Hello, my friend. Good to be here today.
It is wonderful to be here with you today.
Thank you.
I've really been thinking about how supported I feel when we come together to do these. And
Hmm.
over the last 11 weeks, I think, it has really become a holding space for me. And I appreciate you.
Thank you. I think it's so sweet how needing to be in quarantine for COVID-19 and what it was doing to us all. It was really nice to see how you and I both love words and love sharing our favorites and things we were discovering in poetry and even literature in general. And so it's nice to have somebody to play with in that world
That
that enjoys it as much. Yeah. So I'm glad I'm not glad that we've gone through the stuff we've had to go through as quarantine, but I think we made lemonade out of lemons.
kind of sugary lemonade, I'd say.
Yes.
And I'm okay with that.
Good.
Well, the weeks have gone on, and the last week or so, I have found myself having a hard time staying present with what I'm doing,
Mm.
finding myself distracted and pulling myself back to the task that I'm doing. Um, I missed a meeting on Monday because I wasn't very present with myself or my surroundings. So this was the theme when I put out my quest for the poem for today. My intention was around presence, and
Mm.
presence in the midst of sadness and grief. And I think that's part of what's been happening for me. There's sadness and grief in the collective. And then in my family, there's some sadness and grief happening. And today I admitted to myself there's some in my surroundings with endings of things that have been really nurturing for me are coming to a natural end. Um, and so I think all these things, I've had a hard time just being present with the feelings of sadness and grief. So I went looking with this in mind, and I found myself back on Melly O'Brien's website, otherwise known as Mrs. Mindfulness,
Nice.
co-founder of the Mindfulness Summit, which I stumbled on years ago, 21 days of conversations with have some movers and shakers in the arena of mindfulness. So, what brought me to her page was a quest for presence in poetry. And she has a whole blog dedicated to sharing her favorite poems about being present.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Another resource.
yeah. I'll post
Good.
the link in our comments so that other people can access this as well. So, Mrs. Mindfulness led me to a poet by the name of Roger Keyes. And Roger Keyes is a poet. He is a art historian who has written several books about Japanese art. And he's also a professor of Asian art. So he has written this poem called Hokusai Says. And this is based on the artwork of the Japanese artist Hokusai. And you might know him best from his painting of the Great Wave.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I did some research on Roger Keyes and this poem, it sounds like he has taken the artwork of Hokusai and he has given words to his interpretation of Hokusai's artwork. And he is all about notice the words, notice where you're at, notice. And there's nothing too great or too small that you can't notice and be present with.
I love this concept. So he is put personification. He sort of put the story behind the one-dimensional piece of artwork. Ooh.
Yes, his personal story and experience of this one-dimensional artwork, now he's brought in the words.
Oh, I love this concept.
Okay, so a poem entitled Hokusai Says by Roger Keyes.
All right. Would you like me to do a little singing bowl to kind of get us in the moment?
Would love.
Okay.
Hokusai says, look carefully. He says, pay attention, notice. He says, keep looking, stay curious. He says, there is no end to seeing. He says, look forward to getting old. He says, keep changing. You just get more who you really are. He says, get stuck, accept it, repeat. He says, get stuck, accept it, repeat yourself as long as it is interesting. He says, keep doing what you love. He says, keep praying. He says, every one of us is a child. Every one of us is ancient. Every one of us has a body. He says, every one of us is frightened. He says, every one of us has to find a way to live with fear. He says, everything is alive. Shells, buildings, people, fish, mountains, trees, wood is alive. Water is alive. Everything has its own life. Everything lives inside of us. He says, live with the world inside you. He says, it doesn't matter if you draw or write books. It doesn't matter if you saw wood or catch fish. It doesn't matter if you sit at home and stare at the ants on your veranda or the shadows of the trees and grasses in your garden. It matters that you care. It matters that you feel. It matters that you notice. It matters that life lives through you. Contentment is life living through you. Joy is life living through you. Satisfaction and strength is life living through you. He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Love, feel. Let life take you by the hand. Let life live through you.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So what I really enjoyed about this is the poet is speaking as if, is it Hokusai?
Hokusai.
As if what Hokusai is thinking as he is creating that beautiful example, the wave painting.
Yes.
And Hokus, I've seen other works by that artist,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, other wave imagery as well. Um,
Yeah, I think
oh,
I don't know a lot about the artist. In my limited research, I found that he has kind of a series of waves.
yeah.
Um, and he has a masculine wave and a feminine wave, which I found really fascinating. But
Yeah,
yeah, this idea that he wrote this poem as if he were Hokusai, and
yeah.
what Hokusai was saying through his artwork.
He was saying an awful lot.
Doesn't it?
I love the line, repeat yourself as as long as it's interesting.
I love that repeat as long as it's interesting.
Yeah. It reminds me of my grandmother, who was my favorite person in the whole world, who I'm actually named after.
Oh,
Um, she got into her 90s. She would tell me this, kind of, she was telling stories that I had heard. But that line is perfect because I could hear her tell me those forever and ever and ever. Like I never got impatient with her like sometimes you will with people. It's like, hey, you told me that already. I would just like, and probably because I found her to be so interesting. So yeah, that's I love that line.
tell
Yeah.
me again. Repeat, repeat. Stay
Hmm.
curious, stay
So cute.
interested.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Everything is alive. I love that line too because it kind of um, just makes me realize that you know everything in nature is codependent on each other.
right.
Here we are, human beings, once again
Mm-hmm.
needing that lesson to get it, to really embody it, that, in nature, there is not one thing that is better than anything else. There is not, it's all interdependent.
Right.
And we need each other. Mm, yeah.
Right. And one of the messages that came through for me is that one thing is not more significant than the other. So whether you're
Mm,
drawing or writing a book or watching the ants,
yeah.
everything is interesting and we can be curious about everything.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
love the line also in there about live with the worlds inside you.
Yes.
Yeah, live with the worlds inside you. Think that something I have enjoyed in having sort of this, universal timeout that we've all been experiencing is kind of a rediscovery of some things that I used to love to do, like um, art processes,
Mm-hmm.
baking, um, crossword puzzles, just
Mm-hmm.
like, interesting things that I just never made time for. And also just realizing how much I love to research and do a deeper dive. And I can get lost for hours, doing that sort of thing. And yeah, yeah,
Right.
learning to live with the world inside you and actually slow down enough to actually be okay with that. Like,
Yes. Let life
yeah,
live through you, inside you. Yeah.
yeah,
I like that, Julie. I was thinking of that today. I've started something I haven't done since I was a kid, which is doing needlepoint,
Mm,
and I'm on my third pillow
yeah.
from the beginning of all of this change, and I love it. It clears my mind, and I can really just drop in and tap into how am I feeling in this moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about the making, process that
Hmm.
I think that is part of our humanness, being makers.
Right.
And in a way, I think that's like, I found it really fascinating how many people were getting into things like making their own sourdough starters to make bread, and then sharing lessons learned, and then wanting to show their wares, show their breads that they made. And the same thing about picking up, I've always wanted to learn how to do really good hand lettering. Like, we are we are designed to make things, to be creative, to use that energy in all kinds of problem solving in different ways. And I hope this is a call to action that doesn't go away.
Well, I'll tell you, Julie, you just added a piece of healing for me when you use the word make things. We are people who make things, and I struggle with feeling like I've been producing enough.
Hmm.
Um, but making things really resonates with me. It feels like that comes from the heart and the soul, and not out of any kind of external pressure. Whereas for me, producing feels like it's external, and there's pressure to rack up how many things have you produced today. But how many things have I made today? Oh my goodness. What did I
Isn't
make?
thing. The production, show your value, prove you're worthy, demonstrate that that what you've made is high art versus craft. All of that. It's very masculine, isn't it? That
Isn't
energy.
it?
And the feminine energy is slow down, take your time, make it beautiful. No one's watching. Sort of it's a different flow.
Right.
And I think everybody has been hungry for that. And
Yeah.
of course, there's always a time for doing. Action is important. We can't just sit around and contemplate our belly buttons.
Right.
But yeah, I like this rhythm of slow down, pace yourself. There's plenty of time. It always does get done.
Right.
And if it doesn't get done, maybe it didn't need to get done.
It didn't
You
need to get
know?
done. Yeah. Well,
So I love it.
Julie.
So tell me a little bit more about the poet. Say the name again.
So the poet's name is Roger Keyes,
Okay.
and the artist is Hokusai.
Okay. And do we know when Robert Keyes, is he still living? Is he contemporary? Is
He
he
is still living. There wasn't much to be found other than the books that he has written on Japanese art, and that he had been an art history professor at Brown University. But other than that, I had a hard time finding much about him.
Oh, well, gives me something to go on the hunt for. I'm curious.
Hunt, yes. Oh, what you
Like,
find, please post.
okay. Yeah.
And I'll post the poem, I'll post the links to Mrs. Mindfulness.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Beautiful.
it's lovely spending some time with you, Julie.
You too, my friend. You have to get outside and check out the full moon
Oh, I
tomorrow.
checked it out last
Hopefully.
night.
Yeah,
It
it's
was,
pretty potent.
it's pretty. So tomorrow night is going to be pretty powerful. I hope you're going to be out underneath that moon tomorrow.
Betcha. Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you in a few days.
All right. Have a good rest of your week. Until then.
Julie. Bye.